Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled today are our guests, author, health practitioner, Nancy DeVille, and photographer, Jim McHugh. Author Nancy DeVille says she is a child of the 50s, and you'll learn why those years are important. In the foreword to her book, Healthy, Sexy, Happy, she tells us what she is not. Not a medical professional, not a celebrity with a staff of gophers, not formally educated, not a PhD or MD. In fact, she barely finished high school and did a year of college. But let's get back to those 50s, those chemical 50s. Tell us about what happened then.
My family embraced better living with chemistry all the way.
But not drugs. Chemistry in your food, right?
Right. And, ant repellent and everything else that you can think of. So we really didn't know back then.
But everybody was doing that, weren't they?
Not everybody, but, I would say it was very, very popular to eat factory-produced food.
I was going to say, what were you eating? Let's talk about those things.
Joan, my mother went shopping once a month at the Navy Commissary. So you can imagine the shelf life of the foods that we grew up on.
Canned,
boxed, frozen, no vegetables. I don't recall ever eating a vegetable as a child.
That's pretty stiff, isn't it? Because that's when you're forming too as a child. What about your high school days? Let's talk about those too.
I went to high school in Japan, and I do talk about this in my book. I spent a lot of time in Tokyo. I learned how to write my mother's name, sign my mother's signature, and I was a model.
But you were young, and you were skinny.
Yeah, I was young, I was skinny. I would starve all day, smoke cigarettes, and feel very virtuous about that. So I've since learned a lot of different things about weight loss.
Were you drinking at that time too? I mean, is that all part of the smoking and drinking and modeling? And
I was only 16 and 17, so I wasn't a big drinker. I might have had a beer or something like that. But
did that behavior come into your life as you grew older, as your teenage years went on? Did you continue that lifestyle?
Actually, no. I had some really good positive influences in my life. I was really fortunate. First of all, I went to Japan, so I saw that people ate real food. And then I had my grandmother, who didn't live with us, but I had her influence, and she was big on real food. And then my first boyfriend was European, and he was, of course, eating real food. Everybody in Europe ate real food at that time.
Yeah, so was that a difference to you? Could you eat it? I mean, a lot of people go, ooh, vegetables, I can't eat them because they were never raised on them.
Oh no, as soon as I tasted real food, I knew that this was it.
Did you?
For me, yeah.
So where was that then by the time your boyfriend came into?
I was about 17.
And you were still in Japan?
I was still in Japan, and then I came back to the States right before I turned 18. And my grandmother gave me 3 Adele Davis books. Remember her?
Yes, of course.
And I took those in my backpack to India with me. And I learned all about real food. And that was it for me. From then on, I've been a real food eater.
You in your book, you credit your Polish grandmother for a lot of those wonderful things that I guess are old country kind of things that still work today. What were some of those things that she was talking about?
Well, I'd like to just clarify that by saying my grandma was a Polish immigrant, and she came from a very poor family. I have a picture of one of my ancestors standing basically in a shack.
Yeah.
in Poland. And so she suffered a lot of health problems because her family was poor, poor. And then when she was 39, she went into a health lecture and she was converted. So everything she learned from then on. But she was already cooking old country.
But you say 39. Is that when you started writing too?
No, yes, actually,
It's
you're
really
right.
funny, isn't it? How that
Exactly, yeah. I was about 39 or 40 when I
Yeah,
started,
that was very interesting when you said that, because she got her first taste of health food at 39 or 40, and then she became a convert, I guess.
She became a convert. She was the kook, the family kook.
Oh, the cook, because she could eat well.
Right. Yes.
One of the things, though, you said you went on to India, and in your foreword you say, I'm not a Buddhist scholar, but I spent time in India. What were you doing in India? Why did you go there?
Really, I just wanted to have some adventure and see the world. And back then, the world was a very different place. The one thing that I remember so distinctly about India at that time was the only product you could get, the American product, was Coke. Everything else was real food.
Back to chemicals. Yeah, so what were you doing? What did you eat there?
We ate rice and vegetables, fish, curries.
At that time, or later, I guess you say, you felt like you were trapped in a fat body and you wanted to get out, because you do give us a lot of hints in the book of how to lose weight and what to do.
Right. What happened to me was when I was 45, I suffered a thyroid crash and I gained 25 pounds, basically overnight. And even though that doesn't sound like that much, I couldn't lose it. So I developed my program basically from my own experience, even though I was already writing books at that time. And I've learned, and I'm very, very convinced of this from my own research and from what I've seen other people, is that the way to lose weight is to achieve your optimal health, not to go on a diet.
Because once you get on a diet, it's a seesaw, right? The one thing about your book that I love is that it's interactive. You give lists and you can check them off and you can do different things that you, I guess, have researched and put in there.
Optimal health is a journey for everyone. And everybody has a different starting point because we're all unique.
And you started late. We can start, I mean, people can start earlier than that.
Right. Well, I was healthy, I thought. But it just goes to show that anything can happen to anyone at any time.
Well, was there a big turning point that made you stand up and say, I've got to get my health in order?
It was my thyroid crash.
It was. That was it. And that was the turning point. One of the things you do talk about is accelerated aging.
Yes.
And how does that come about? Tell us about that.
That is a really important thing for people to understand. People are breaking down more than they're building up. So it used to be when people got really old, they would develop cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke. Now we're seeing this in children. So
really
children
early on,
and
right.
teenagers, and these are the degenerative diseases of aging. So people are feeling and looking much older than their years. So the reason is they're breaking down more than they're building up. So my program can be summed up simply as building up more than you break down.
So what do we do? I mean, what do you do with your children that are breaking down? I mean, that's pretty desperate.
Yes, it is. It's urgent, and people need to pay attention to it. First of all, stop eating factory food. It's not recognized by your body as nutrition. So you're breaking down more than you build up when you eat factory food. You want to eat.
And what if factory food, like well, box cereals?
Yes, but let me just explain what real food is, and then anything that's not real food is factory food.
Right.
So real food is anything that could be picked, gathered, milked, hunted, or fished, grown or raised in a clean environment that hasn't had any science fiction processing done to it. So let me give you an example.
Science fiction.
Yes.
Cloning.
Organic cold cereal and soy milk are not natural foods. They're factory produced foods. I don't care how big the words organic are on the packaging.
Yeah. That was interesting that I was reading where you kind of dismiss soy, which is one of the things that people are always pushing. Oh, soy is so great for us.
You have to understand who's saying that. Monsanto, Cargill, Archer Midland Daniels. These are big
Cultural
corporations. This is not real food. This is not historically eaten food.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But when you were in Japan, didn't they eat a lot of soy?
No.
Oh, they didn't?
No. And that's what got me onto researching it. I thought, well, that's not my experience. And I ate thousands of meals in restaurants. So I wanted to see what they were talking about when they said Asians ate a lot of soy, because I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because that's one of the things we always go back on and we go, oh, this is going to be healthy.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because it is not something you can pick or grow or whatever, like you were talking about.
80% of the soy that we're eating is Monsanto Roundup Ready soy.
You mean made? Monsanto made?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Oh. How did you decide what to put in your book?
I wanted it to be my personal program because I developed it for myself and it works.
It's very simple.
Very simple.
It's nothing that is like, no, I mean, you've simplified it so that anyone can understand it and remember it.
It's really important for people to have a basic grasp of physiology, to understand how metabolism breaks you down and builds you back up again, because the whole goal is to build up more than you break down.
And when we talk about those foods that you were talking about, one of the other books, because I know you said you've written 7 books, one of the other books is Death by Supermarket. Is this kind of a carryover from that?
Yeah, Death by Supermarket is the foundation. If you want to really understand how the food industry is fattening us up and the diet and the drug industries are profiting. So it just sort of peels away the layers of the onion. But then Healthy, Sexy, Happy is my program based on all of the knowledge that I've accumulated in the last 15 years.
Did you have help with this book? Did you have help researching and doing all that, or writing?
I have a lot of friends in the health world, in the alternative health world.
Yeah, I know you say you went away and you spent time concentrating at a spa and writing.
Well, actually, I wasn't in a spa. I was really working really hard for a year on this book, but I do have a lot of contacts in the alternative world, so I was able to call on people, get interviews, get quotes, and things like that.
Is the book just for women?
No, it's got a kind of a girly cover.
I know, but it also has a kind of a girly feel inside too. And yet you do, talk about men's prostate and different problems that men have.
You'd be surprised how many men readers I have on my Facebook page, how many comments I get from men, because men are really understanding that they don't want to age in an accelerated way either.
Accelerated aging, that's really the key word.
Yes.
Before we go, when you go out to a restaurant, can you eat? Are you a vegetarian? How do you handle this?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that. I'm a supporter of eating meat and the fat off of meat. And
really?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons I think that I healed so well.
That's very interesting because of the oil inside of the fat and
because
saturated
fat, contrary to what we've been told, is an historically eaten fat, and it's very healing.
That's so great, and what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, Nancy DeVille.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching. Don't go away. We'll be right back with photographer Jim McHugh. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with photographer Jim McHugh, who was born in London but raised off and on in Europe and the United States. He graduated from UCLA's film school, where his daughter Chloe is now enrolled. Jim's grandfather, the great American songster, songwriter, Jimmy McHugh, created wonderful songs like Sunny Side of the Street and I'm in the Mood for Love. And I Can't Give You Anything for Love. Lots of love in there, Jim.
A lot of love. Yeah, a lot of love.
But that was in the 50s. So I don't know what happened to Jim during that time. Jimmy McHugh was writing with glamorous Hollywood people. And you then went on to photograph those glamorous Hollywood people in the 80s. And 90s.
And 70s.
And 70s
And
too?
70s,
Well,
yeah.
was that a big influence, seeing all those movie stars around your grandfather?
I think so. I grew up with that, so that was what was not unusual for me. And
Just like all the Hollywood brats,
all the Hollywood, well. So, and I was going to UCLA Film School and started taking pictures just as for a friend, and I'd been doing it for a long time. And I started working for magazines, and then People magazine came along, and I worked for them for 25 years.
But that's where you got, where the celebrities came into
Right.
play.
I had
didn't
worked
they?
for W and Women's Wear before then, and that was a really great experience. There are a lot of photographers that have worked for W or Women's Wear.
Well, one of the things, besides working for W, Women's Wear, People, you were doing art photography along the way, because your work has been in galleries and museums across the United States and in Europe. Tell me about, I know you've been in all of these museums, but tell me about that first little camera that every kid has.
Well, I had a Brownie when I was little, and a Brownie Star Flash, which I actually still have. But when I was 12 or 13, my stepfather was a writer, and we went to Germany. We were living in Germany. And I bought my first little 35 millimeter camera for, it was 100 Deutsche Marks, which was $25, and it had a little brown leather case. And I felt, oh, I'm really there now.
But
So,
what were you taking pictures of then?
do you know pretty much what I'm taking pictures of now? I photographed architecture, traveled around, photographed architecture in Germany. And as a child, to be able to wander around with a camera and take pictures was extraordinary. And I loved getting prints back. And when I was in junior high, I learned to develop film and process film. And that,
Were
so.
you taking pictures of any of your grandfather's friends, songwriters,
You know, I
singers?
should say I wish I were, but I wasn't. And we have these huge archives at Jimmy McHugh Music. And of course, my grandfather, a modest soul that he was, documented every single aspect of his life. So there are all of these photographs of him and Clark Gable and him and everybody at his pool parties in Beverly Hills on Sierra Drive. So, and interestingly, when I was working for People magazine, I did a story on weddings. And they said, oh, well, this is where you need to go. It's 709 North Sierra Drive. And I thought, oh, my God, that's my grandfather's house.
You're kidding.
It's so strange.
Who was living in the house
The
then?
woman is, her husband is the head of surgery at Cedars.
A doctor was living
A doctor,
there?
yeah, a doctor. And they gave me this, there's a plate for his stereo, a black plate, and it says, custom made for Jimmy McHugh or something. And it's an old stereo with levers and things, whatnot. So it was really an amazing thing. The pool is still there, all that. So.
That's really funny because Mac David lived in my house.
Oh my God.
And so he was a great songwriter too. He had a lot of awards. Walt Disney worked at the Disney Studios. And that's just like a couple of blocks away.
Do you know?
And Shirley Cassidy lived on your street. And she was always singing. Or on your grandfather's street.
So did Ella Fitzgerald lived on Sierra as well.
So there was all this music in the
a lot of music.
hills.
Well, Beverly Hills was very happy.
That was really great. Going back to your Deutschmark and your little camera and going back and forth from Europe to here, did you feel unsettled? Did you think that your camera gave you the grounding?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. And
Because
that's it. So,
because you were traveling a lot.
Yeah, I liked it, and you just have a knack for it, and you like it, and it grounded me. I photographed when I was in junior high. I went to school in Rome at Notre Dame, same as here, Notre Dame, and so we would photograph the basketball games, and then process the film during the games, and then we'd put the photos up after, and the dances and whatnot. I love photography.
So you really were into it in high school by that time.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Well, did you have this camera then?
No, but I think somebody did. This camera is actually. This camera was actually owned by a very well-known photographer, Mario Castelli, who was a photographer for Playboy for many years. And
we have a picture of you holding this camera.
Oh, yeah.
It looks great. Where was that picture?
In a place called San Galgano, which is in Tuscany.
It is in Italy. It looked like Italy.
Yeah. It's remarkable. This was the camera that people used, a press camera.
How'd you carry it?
Oh, the interesting thing about it, not that this is a photography show, but You can hold this camera very steady at a half a second, sometimes even a second, because it's so heavy.
Because of the heaviness.
Whereas
Yeah,
the
yeah.
little digital cameras now, or even 35 millimeter cameras, are very light and they're hard to hold. Yeah.
Well, I'm jumping all around
No,
in your
it's good,
career,
good.
but we talked about museums and the art side of what you do rather than the commercial where you,
Yes.
really made a living. And you can't make a living in the art side, I know,
No.
except
Some
for
do.
one. But you've done books, Art of Light and Space.
California
which was-
Painter's New Work with Henry Hopkins, and I did the cover of David Hockney's book, That's the Way I See It.
But also you did California Painters, New Work.
Yes.
But let's talk about the Art of Light and Space, because it was all Polaroids.
It was actually, start with this.
Could you shoot Polaroid with this
Yes,
camera?
it's a very large, it's not like an SX70 Polaroid, it's a large format 4x5 Polaroid.
But are those archival?
They are, and then I scan them. There's a type of Polaroid, this will get very techie, there's a type of Polaroid called Type 55, which was developed in the 40s by Ansel Adams and Edward Weston and the Polaroid company, and it actually produces a real negative. And so the prints are made in an enlarger through a negative. So they are archival, yes.
Oh, they are, because
Yeah.
regular Polaroid,
It
we don't
actually
know what
is
happens,
filmed.
right?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's hard to
The
say,
one you pull
really.
out and it just develops in front of you?
It'll depend. I mean, it depends on how you care for them, and it depends on the temperatures and the batch that was
When I was
created.
in Europe, a lot of Polaroid pictures were
Yeah.
on view in different museums, and they're beautiful pieces, but I wonder how long they're going to last.
They won't last forever.
They won't last. So the next book, which was California Painters, or let's talk about who was in Light and Space.
Robert Irwin, Larry Bell, Bruce Nauman,
The Light and Space
I think Leda
artist.
Albuquerque, the Light and Space
The Light and
artists.
Space
yes.
people, yeah. And
Yeah.
Henry Hopkins, who was a great friend of all of ours,
Yeah.
wrote the foreword.
He actually, Jan Butterfield did Light and Space. Henry Hopkins did California Painter's New Work.
And that cover is,
Well, it's actually a painting by David Hockney that was, I think it's his living room up in the Hollywood Hills. Yeah,
right. And who's in that? There's a lot of artists in that, too.
There are a lot of people that are in that. And now you're going to stump the band, but I think Laddie Dill is in that. David Hockney is in that.
I
There
know.
are 50, 60 people in it. I can't
It's
remember.
it's got that many people in
It's
it?
sort of it's out of print, but it's sort of a Bible at this point.
The other thing that I think is fantastic is the book of buildings. You're taking pictures of old buildings just in LA or all over the world.
Well, I actually started doing that, basically photographing places from my childhood. And when I was in Italy, we went back to Italy, and when I went back to Italy, we photographed many places in Rome, and the Villa Borghese and whatnot. And before the Jubilee, the Pope's Jubilee, which I think was in 2000? All of the buildings looked exactly the same, and then they painted them for the Jubilee, and so I was able to get these buildings before they changed.
Oh, you got them photographed before.
Yeah,
so
it was great.
Is that
It was
in
great,
this
yeah.
new book?
No, but that's another body of work. The Los Angeles pieces really started photographing places that I remember as a child in LA, and I was really started it when my daughter was born, or when she was maybe 7 or 8, because she grew up in a time when, at that time, of course, all cars had phones in them, and I realized my mother and my grandfather came out to Los Angeles in the 20s, and then in the very early 40s, my mother, and how Los Angeles must have looked to them at that time. And I realized how that really was going away. That as I grew up here, as you grew up here, we still remember how our parents probably saw this city. But Chloe wouldn't see it that way at all.
No, but those buildings are what rooted our past.
That's right.
And some of the neon lights
Yeah.
and the facades are
Beautiful
all being
deco,
changed.
completely, and the scale is smaller. So when I was a child, the City Hall, which is a magnificent building, Art
In
Deco,
Beverly Hills.
the one in Beverly Hills and the one in
downtown.
downtown Los Angeles, which was the one Superman leaped over.
Yeah.
Wherever you were high in LA, in the hills or whatever, and you looked to downtown, you always saw that building. But now you can't see it at all because it's completely surrounded by skyscrapers.
And going down to downtown
Yeah.
on Beverly Boulevard, there's this beautiful old building with a facade. It's a dog hospital.
Yes, right.
Have you taken
Yeah,
pictures
yeah, I
of that?
have, yeah.
And there's just a
Yeah,
lovely
dog-
sign
yeah,
on top.
beautiful,
And in the
beautiful.
facade, there's a cat on one side
Yes.
and a dog on the
That would
other.
never happen. You should see my German Shepherd. Anyway.
I'm so happy that it's still
Yeah.
there and that you're doing pictures of these. Before we go, let's quickly go through some of these pictures.
Sure.
Sheryl Crow,
Yes.
tell
Sheryl
us a little
Crow.
bit about that.
We photographed her for Architectural Digest quite recently. She was wonderful. I mean, we just had a great time, and of course, because of the music and everything, we had a lot in common. And very wonderful professional
Clint
person.
Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. That, of course, that was an amazing event. That, I mean, you just think, oh my God, Clint Eastwood. And the funny part of it is, when he comes in the room, he comes in and you have assistants and all different people, and he says, "Hello, I'm Clint Eastwood."
Like you're not going to know.
Duh. So people, "Hello, I'm Clint Eastwood." People are, "Oh yes, so you are." It was so impressive, Clint Eastwood. Yeah.
And also, is he the one who gave you the time limit?
Right.
I love that.
He gives you the time. One of the things when you're shooting personalities, people are, we're in a hurry. Usually not the personalities, managers and whatnot. And so Clint Eastwood will say, well, you have 15 minutes. And he gives you that 15 minutes. He doesn't look at his clock once. But at the end of 15 minutes, he goes away. And but you know that. You don't say, oh, well, how about another 5 minutes or
yes.
something. You okay, that's good. You know, let me do my thing. You realize the time limit. And I thought that was extremely professional.
Yeah, that was great. And the last one was when Andy Warhol came here to do the Love Boat.
He did the Love Boat.
I know.
yeah.
We did a party over there and saw him afterwards because I was still writing for Interview then.
That's right. Do you know, I have to say, this whole art project, which I've done over the years, you were so helpful in getting me started in that. I just had no idea, and you gave me this whole list of people, Joe Good and
Billy
Al and Chuck Arnaldi and
Ed
Laddie
Moses.
Dill and Ed Moses, and I had no idea, you know, and you call these people and tell them that Joan said the call, and I wound up photographing absolutely everybody. Richard Diebenkorn.
Oh, I know.
All,
But those
all
were,
of these people,
that was,
Sam Francis.
It
all of
meant
these
so
people.
much to me.
Yeah.
And to know that a professional was doing it was, you can't ask for anything more.
I mean, it was great, and I remember showing pictures to Billy Al, and I said, he said, oh, you should do more and more of this, and I said, well, you know, everybody takes pictures of artists, and he said, oh, not like these, he said, and it just stuck with me. I mean, I've done it for 35 years because of that little comment.
And that's why you were recommended, because I knew the artist would love it. And we loved your interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Keep writing. Email JAQUINN1@AOL.com. See you next time.